My mother knew that she was seen and she was heard in her anguish. When we're talking about mental illness, it's very important and to be clear and to make the distinction between our loved one and the disease.
Ashley Judd, a Hollywood star with a haunting past, has finally spoken with unflinching honesty about the shadows that followed her home. In a family praised for harmony and talent, cracks ran deep, too deep to ignore. What happened during one of their most public moments that left Ashley forever changed? And what message did she receive that morning that would alter everything? This is not just a story of fame or loss. It's about what's left unspoken, buried beneath applause. One moment in particular reveals more than years of interviews ever could. It's raw, unexpected, and quietly heartbreaking. So, what really happened in the moments before silence fell? Let's take a closer look, beyond the surface. Ashley Judd's painful journey. Ashley Judd's upbringing in the Judd family was anything but conventional. While the world saw a successful, glamorous family rising to stardom in the country music world, Ashley lived through instability and emotional neglect that shaped her sense of self from a young age. In the Judd family, truth be told, she opened up about the deeply complex experience of growing up in a household where emotional boundaries were often blurred or disregarded. The fame surrounding her family didn't shield her from confusion. It intensified it. Public appearances and carefully curated images of unity masked an environment where Ashley often felt invisible and unheard. From an early age, Ashley developed a keen awareness of emotional danger and the need to self-protect. She described feeling like an outsider in her own family, a sentiment that grew with time and experience. A particularly scarring moment came during a televised family interview, which she later described as traumatizing. What viewers might have seen as a light-hearted reunion felt, to Ashley, like an ambush. This wasn't an isolated incident, but one of many that taught her the cost of vulnerability in the Judd household. Those experiences cultivated a quiet but powerful inner defense mechanism. Ashley did withdraw emotionally from the closest dysfunctionalities. While self-preservation tends to project cold and distant moods, it is only seen as survival. Through the years, she learned to hold all energy inside and create a life and self separate from celebrity chaos in her mother's and sister's worlds. She found safety in solitude, and eventually in advocacy, turning private pain into purpose. She distanced herself, but even then, she never did totally disconnect from the world, always kept in touch, always could be spied on, and returned when it most mattered. It's not a story of estrangement, but one of silent endurance. The Odyssey has been, for Ashley, one of finding strength in naming the very traumas that caused her silence. In finding voice, Ashley was not only shedding light on her beleaguering personal battles, but also on the more widespread consequences of having grown up in a family lost in unarticulated grief. Her healing authorities began not with answers, but rather with honesty. That honesty, raw and unexpurgated, has blown open cracked doors to conversations well overdue. Just as Ashley found her voice, a different kind of silence was forming between Naomi and someone she once called her greatest partner. Winana's creative shift and Naomi's silent grief. Winana Judd's evolution as a solo artist marked a turning point not only in her career, but also in her relationship with her mother, Naomi. After decades of performing as a duo, Winana's decision to take creative control and invite her husband, Cactus Moser, into both her personal and professional world caused a quiet upheaval. Moser's role as her manager and duet partner signaled a new chapter for Winana, but for Naomi, It felt like a slow erasure of the partnership they had built. Their once shared spotlight began to narrow, casting Naomi further into the background. The emotional toll this shift took on Naomi was significant. She had always envisioned her journey in music as intrinsically linked to her daughter. Their bond wasn't just familial, it was foundational to both of their careers. Watching Winona reimagine her sound, performance style, and public image with a new partner was more than just an artistic divergence. It was a painful separation. Naomi wasn't just losing relevance in the act, she was losing her place in the story they once wrote together. Interviews with Winona revealed that it was the hardest for her to speak to their mother since Cactus took over on decisions that Naomi had input on. Still, through Naomi's silence, one could see her grief manifested as it ran a course between her behavior and moods. She became quite withdrawn emotionally and held a kind of small, quiet sadness that not even applause could comfort. She had been so completely merged with the Judds that the sea change left her professionally sidelined and personally wounded. The very thing that once united them is music. It has become a wellspring of unspoken tension and sadness. Winona had her connection with her mother even within such internal fracture. Attending Naomi's funeral, standing on the Hall of Fame stage to receive their induction as one. The emotional cost of that gap between creativity remained, however. It was a poignant reminder of what happens when evolving dreams no longer align with what Naomi has inherited. Silent grief. It was not a matter of blame, it was just a sense of loss. And in Naomi's case, that loss was a loss not of a goodbye, but of a very quiet change. So much so that even long before the last curtain fell, she had already been left behind. Behind the stage lights. Naomi Judd's radiant public persona belied a world of inner turmoil. While fans knew her as a charismatic performer with a voice that echoed through generations, her private life was a maze of silent suffering. Offstage, she wrestled with a crushing mix of emotional instability, chronic insomnia, and anxiety that refused to subside. She spent long nights pacing the floor, tormented by thoughts she couldn't quiet and emotions she couldn't name. According to those closest to her, Naomi often expressed that she felt something was physically and emotionally broken inside. A persistent unease that no amount of success could heal. Even in moments of triumph, Naomi carried a sense of dread. She would often retreat into solitude after performances, emotionally exhausted from masking her distress. Public life required a performance of strength and grace, but inside, she was worn thin by fears she couldn't shake. The applause was loud, but the loneliness afterward was louder. Naomi spoke of her brain like it was a separate entity, one she couldn't trust, one that worked against her in private moments when no one was watching. Her family saw a side of Naomi that no member of the public had ever seen. They depicted a woman who could move from moments of tenderness to instances of agitation and despair. She wanted to find out what was taking place within her, often blaming herself for feeling out of sorts. Over the years, this splendid version and the sad, emotional being became harder and harder to reconcile. People who cared for her surrounded her. Yet, the reality of Naomi's mental health felt like an abyss of loneliness. What existed within her mind was another world, one illuminated with pleasure, yet shrouded in doubt and deep distress, contrasting with the other facade she tried to maintain. Naomi Judd's story is a belief that whatever is seen is concealed even further. Underneath her glamour and charm, there was a woman who was suffering in silent combat against herself. Her struggle was not loud and had little drama, but rather was persistent, corrosive, and deeply lonely. Like so many, She carried on these battles with great dignity until the end. But dignity does not mean easy, and bravery does not always come with clarity. A mother left behind. One of the most heartbreaking elements of Naomi Judd's decline was the emotional distance that formed between her and her daughters, Winona and Ashley. At a time when she needed connection the most, Naomi found herself increasingly alone. Winona was frequently touring and reinventing her brand, while Ashley was managing her own emotional wounds, often from a distance. The result was a mother left suspended between her past role as a guiding force and her present reality, one marked by disconnection and quiet longing. The adjustments to her daughters' lives, although inadvertent, left Naomi adrift. Winona's development as a creative force and her collaboration with Cactus Moser became a priority, producing an organic realignment of the dynamic that previously characterized the Judds. Ashley, on the other hand, had learned how to defend herself by withdrawing. Although she adored her mother, years of emotional stress had formed a pattern of silence that sometimes erected additional barriers. Naomi was still at the center of their lives, but not always at the center of their presence. These evolving relationships weighed heavily on Naomi's already fragile state. She often voiced a sense of being left behind, not in bitterness, but in sorrow. She wanted to be part of their worlds, creatively, emotionally, and intimately, but didn't always know how to express that need. The family was still bound by love, but the kind of open, ongoing dialogue that might have soothed Naomi's fears was missing. And as her mental condition deteriorated, so did her conviction that she was still necessary. Naomi Judd's story is a poignant echo of how emotional distance can impact one's feeling of value, particularly within a family defined by strong ties and a public persona. Her daughters adored her, yet the communication breakdown and the buildup of unspoken hurt created a chasm that even mutual bereavement could not immediately fill. Naomi did not merely want attention, she wanted connection. And in the quiet of her isolation, her silence did not shout, it roared. Medication dependency and the mental toll. As Naomi Judd continued to struggle with worsening mental health symptoms, she turned to medical professionals in search of relief. Over time, she was prescribed an increasing number of medications, including benzodiazepines like Klonopin and clonazepam, powerful substances often used to treat acute anxiety and panic disorders. While these medications offered temporary calm, their long-term use posed serious risks. Instead of stabilizing Naomi, they began to cloud her thinking, impair her memory, and amplify the emotional distress they were meant to alleviate. The side effects of extended benzodiazepine use can be debilitating, particularly for someone already experiencing deep psychological turmoil. Naomi became increasingly reliant on these medications, sometimes taking them at dangerously frequent intervals. Ashley Judd later revealed that her mother was instructed to take doses as often as every 4 hours. As dependency grew, so did the instability in Naomi's behavior, marked by heightened agitation, confusion, and emotional fragility. The medications dulled her clarity, but intensified her sense of being trapped inside a mind she couldn't escape. Concerned, the family tried several measures to assist Naomi in cleansing and regaining emotional equilibrium. Ashley revealed in one of the docuseries' illuminating anecdotes that she attempted, in a moment of humor and desperation, to replace Naomi's prescription with a tic-tac, a brief attempt to exert control over an uncontrolled circumstance. Naomi's joyous response to the placebo pill highlighted how tragic her addiction was. Even attempts disguised as comedy and kindness were a reflection of their collective impotence. Naomi's usage of medication was obviously more about getting by day to day than it was about healing. The thin line separating treatment from harm is a sobering reality that many people with complicated mental illness must deal with. As this chapter of Naomi's life illustrates, medication became both a hardship and a lifesaver for Naomi. Her story highlights structural problems in mental health treatment, where substances are frequently overprescribed and poorly supervised, especially for celebrities who get erratic or overly cautious assistance. The failure of a system that was ill-prepared to manage chronic mental illness with compassion and sensitivity, rather than the failure of love, was the cause of Naomi's misery, which was made worse by her medication dependence. But just when it seemed the spiral couldn't go any deeper, one final message would change everything. The last cry for help. On the morning of April 30th, 2022, Naomi Judd sent a text message to her daughter Ashley. "Piela's help." Those two words carried the weight of years of pain. And though Ashley had seen her mother suffer before, this time it felt different. When she arrived at Naomi's home just outside Nashville, she found her pacing, distraught, and muttering that she no longer wanted to live. It was a moment of harrowing clarity. Ashley, trained in grace under pressure, attempted to soothe her mother while holding back the surge of dread growing inside her. Ashley placed her hand gently on Naomi's leg, offering reassurance and physical comfort. In that brief moment, Naomi began to soften. The agitation in her voice gave way to stillness. She shared private, deeply personal thoughts with Ashley, details Ashley chose to keep confidential, honoring the sacredness of what passed between them. One of the reasons Naomi cited for holding on as long as she had was her love for Ashley. In response, Ashley told her mother that she didn't need to carry that burden anymore. "I'm okay," she said. "You don't have to worry about me." Following that came a silence of finality. Shortly afterwards, Naomi went upstairs. Later, Ashley checked on her, only to discover that her mother had taken her own life. Instead of screaming or collapsing, Ashley chose simply to be with Naomi. She held her. She spoke to her. She kissed her. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've seen how much you've been suffering." Ashley described those moments to be not just tragic, but profoundly intimate. An unplanned, painful ritual of love between mother and daughter. There was destruction, but also relief. This left Ashley with a memory that no kid should ever have to carry. But it also granted what few actually get: an ending. It was everything one could do after listening to Naomi for many years, not just as a mother, but as a woman afflicted by a disease. Ashley wasn't able to save her, but was there to accompany her through her last breath. Not as a celebrity or caregiver, but as just a daughter who had witnessed love, sorrow, and forgiveness come full circle. Naomi's last gasp wasn't just a plea. It was an exchange of the emotional torch between generations of resilience. Ashley's last moments with her mother. In the Judd family. Truth be told, Ashley Judd recounts the most personal and heartbreaking chapter of her life, her final moments with her mother, Naomi. After discovering Naomi had taken her own life, Ashley didn't leave her side. She didn't panic or flee. Instead, she stayed in the room, holding her mother's body, whispering words of comfort, and stroking her hair. It wasn't just a daughter grieving. It was a woman honoring the full weight of a relationship built on both trauma and deep love. Ashley later described the moment as a strange mixture of sorrow and sacredness. "She was so soft. She smelled so pretty," she said, capturing the deeply human essence of goodbye. The chaos of what had just occurred did not overwhelm Ashley's ability to be present. In that space of stillness, she told her mother it was okay to go, that she was forgiven, that she was seen, and most importantly, that she was loved. It was the final act in a long, painful, but ultimately transformative relationship. Deeper impulses roamed the land of emotion than mere words could signify. Naomi's death, despite leaving an ache of devastation, turned a page on a long novel of miscommunication, untreated mental health illnesses, and quiet reconciliation. Ashley not only lost her mother, but also someone at the very center of her emotional saga. Yet, in that moment of holding space at Naomi's threshold, Ashley felt an unexpected form of relief. Not one that undid the pain, but one that permitted her to accurately hold and honor her pain without resistance. In the ensuing weeks, Ashley went into EMDR therapy to work through the trauma she had witnessed. Her healing was raw. It was ongoing. It was patently public. Still, throughout it all, she carried the memory of those last hours and days not only as a burden, but also as a blessing. She had been there for her mother, really there. And that memory of being there, born from that yarn of loss, will ever remain the cornerstone at the present moment of Ashley's journey to fiercely honor Naomi's life with truth and dignity and courageous compassion. What makes Ashley's experience so evocative is the way it reflects a new psychological insight into post-traumatic growth. The theory that extreme emotional suffering can give rise to meaningful change. Ashley has talked in interviews about those last moments not as moments she endured, but as moments that altered her at a deep level. It was the ultimate fulfillment of the love in the relationship that we had changed, she explained on the docuseries, describing a premise that trauma therapists frequently cite, that being fully present in mourning, without denial, can bring greater understanding and emotional transparency. This perspective aligns with findings in grief psychology, where moments of connection at the end of life, particularly in cases of mental illness or strained familial bonds, can paradoxically bring healing to relationships that once felt broken. For Ashley, the experience was not only about loss, it was about bearing witness to Naomi's humanity in its fullest, most fragile form. The fight to protect Naomi's dignity. In the aftermath of Naomi Judd's death, her family was forced to endure not only their grief, but also a deeply personal violation. Tabloids obtained and published graphic details from the scene of her passing, including photographs and a private post-it note, turning a sacred moment into a public spectacle. These materials were sourced through public records requests made to local law enforcement, revealing a gap in the law that failed to protect families in cases of non-criminal deaths. For Ashley Judd, this intrusion compounded an already devastating trauma, turning mourning into a battle to reclaim her mother's dignity. Ashley, along with her family, responded not with silence, but with action. She became a vocal advocate for legislative change in Tennessee, pushing to amend state laws that required officials to release sensitive materials to the public, even in deeply personal tragedies. Their proposed bill aimed to limit access to graphic photos and documents, particularly in non-criminal deaths, following the precedent of privacy protections already in place in states like California and Florida. It wasn't just about Naomi, it was about protecting all families from similar exploitation during their most vulnerable moments. Yet, while it generated intrigue and much conversation, the bill was brought to a standstill towards the end of 2023, as representatives of Tennessee turned their attention elsewhere following the shooting incident at the Covenant School. The Judd family bill quietly disappeared from the ongoing legislative scene for being caught in competing priorities. Yet, the message behind their arguments reached sympathy far and wide. Grieving families deserve privacy, not headlines. For Ashley, it was not about a change in policy, but rather a case determined that personal pain should not be turned into clickbait. What this chapter gave birth to was a fresh, shrill call for ethical responsibility in the way society now conducts itself regarding death, especially those associated with mental illness. Ashley had reframed the argument not as a demand for secrecy, but for decency. Naomi's story, already so emotionally complex and fraught with difficulty, deserved to be remembered in grace, not in sensationalism. Through this fight, Ashley carried her mother's legacy beyond music into justice, safety, and compassion for those who, like Naomi, quietly suffered beneath the surface. Compounding the pressure of Ashley Judd's activism was a cultural reckoning more broadly around ethics in the media and how public figures in crisis are treated. Over the past few years, there have been comparable instances, from the release of Kobe Bryant crash site images to leaked information regarding Anthony Bourdain's last moments, that have provoked outrage among the public and raised scrutiny regarding the handling of sensitive material. These events, such as Naomi Judd's, challenged important questions about where the line is to be drawn between public interest and individual dignity. As Ashley wrote in a New York Times op-ed, "We have to do better for families. We require a different set of standards for how we treat people when they are hurt." Her plea was not for privacy, but for cultural transformation that responds to grief with humanity, not exploitation. This provides background to the Judd family's activism and places Naomi's narrative within the context of a broader movement calling for compassion from institutions and the media. Transforming pain into purpose. After the loss of her mother, Ashley Judd found herself in a place few can imagine, grappling with the immediate trauma of witnessing death and the long-term impact of years lived under emotional strain. It wasn't just one event that broke her. It was a lifetime of suppressed pain finally surfacing. Determined to process her grief in a healthy, conscious way, Ashley turned to EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing, a specialized technique designed to help individuals heal from trauma by reprocessing painful memories. For Ashley, it became the lifeline she didn't know she needed. The therapy sessions were demanding, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. EMDR required her to revisit the darkest corners of her mind, from the chaos of discovering Naomi's body to the unresolved childhood wounds she had long buried. The trauma of growing up in a high-profile yet unstable household had left scars that therapy finally began to uncover and address. Each session peeled back another layer, revealing truths Ashley had lived with but never fully understood. In facing those memories, she began the long process of reframing them, not as sources of shame, but as milestones of endurance. She has gone through the journey with others. Ashley had shared her journey openly in public interviews and the Lifetime docuseries, emerging as a silent lighthouse for others who are trying to navigate through grief, trauma, and the aftermath of taking their own life. She never claimed to have answers. She provided presence, a commitment to showing that healing can be wayward, that sometimes surviving emotional chaos requires staring right into the face of pain and sitting in it. Her graveness spoke to the hard realities of mental illness in families, reminding the populace that oftentimes a strength is to be found not in holding it all together, but in falling down. Ashley is still on her way to healing, but choosing the speak over silence makes her purpose out of beyond comprehension loss. Now, it is no longer just about paying tribute to her mother, but also about changing the story for others suffering in silence. Ashley Judd has creatively reframed what it means to be resilient through advocacy, therapy, and truths. Her voice is no longer just that of the daughter. It is the voice of someone walking through fire who has decided to carry a light for those still lost in the smoke. Ashley's journey is part of a larger cultural change in the way public figures are starting to address trauma more openly. In the past, mourning, particularly around taking own life, was kept hidden behind veils of stigma. But Ashley, along with other survivors of loss, is rewriting that script. Her openness to discuss EMDR therapy and emotional collapse has put her in the company of an increasing number of women, employing vulnerability as activism. Public celebrities such as Prince Harry, Lady Gaga, and Selena Gomez have done the same with their experiences with trauma therapy, further normalizing mental health care and demonstrating how visibility can heal. In Ashley's instance, her activism isn't merely individualistic, it's political. She isn't simply shattering generational patterns within her own household, but also disassembling cultural silence regarding the emotional impact of taking own life. In so doing, she challenges everyone to view healing as a shared act of courage rather than shame. And as her healing began, the spotlight shifted to a bittersweet event that would echo far beyond the stage. A legacy interrupted. Naomi Judd's induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame was meant to be a celebration of a life defined by grace and groundbreaking success. Scheduled for May 1, 2022, the ceremony was to honor the musical dynasty she built with Winona, an unshakable force that produced multiple #1 hits and earned 5 Grammy Awards. But in a cruel twist of fate, Naomi was no longer there to accept the honor. Her passing the day before cast a solemn shadow over what should have been her crowning achievement. Instead of applause, there was an aching silence. This moment revealed an excruciating truth, that even at the height of recognition, Naomi was still overwhelmed by invisible pain. The glimmer of public accolades could not eclipse the darkness she had fought for decades. Her name was etched into history, but her heart had carried too much for too long. The Hall of Fame ceremony, though moving and respectful, became something entirely different, less about accomplishment and more about remembrance. Her absence turned it into a space not only of celebration, but of mourning. For Winona, being on that stage by herself was a bitter reminder of all they'd had and lost. She decided to press on with the ceremony, paying tribute to what they'd created as a couple. But her speech was laced with sorrow, her bearing informed by grief. Country music fans came together to support her, showering her with love. But the deeper message remained. Behind each legacy is an individual, and behind each individual, a struggle the world will never truly comprehend. Naomi Judd's legacy lives on, though its story has grown. She will be remembered, not just by her chart toppers or shining stage presence, but for being vulnerable, multifaceted, and for having the unseen pain she endured till the end. Her life wasn't a tale of warning, it was a reminder to reach deeper, hear harder, and know that greatness doesn't equal immunity to misery. In her dying act, Naomi left not just music behind, she left a message, one that still resonates. Even legends can be made to feel invisible, and even icons need to be held gently. Naomi Judd's passing on the night before her induction also brought into focus wider discussions of the mental health issues faced by women in entertainment, particularly those of a particular generation. Like Judy Garland, Whitney Houston, or the Cranberries' Dolores O'Riordan, Naomi was part of a generation of women who faced enormous creative stress as they worked within structures that disregarded emotional welfare. We've grown to anticipate our female icons to be everything: strong, polished, perpetually graceful, cultural critic Tressie McMillan Cottom stated, but we don't often ask at what cost to them. Naomi's tale disrupts that expectation. Her last no-show at the ceremony was not merely a family's sorrow. It was a cultural reckoning. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this. And don't go just yet. Click the next video on your screen to continue the journey. You won't want to miss what comes next.